Welcome to Warhammer 40k lore in the Bible, where I pull from Warhammer 40k lore to help explain biblical lore. And today, I'm going to be reacting to Chaos Corruption TikToks. I also do a lore series every Monday, so if you want to check that out, I just went over Chaos Corruption, and it'll help explain some of the stuff I'm bringing today on these. And I do short format. If you can't tell, this is my short that's up, or TikTok, I should say. That my last, or the YouTube portion did not get pushed at all. Like usually I get like 1K, but anyways, so if you want to check it out, it is on YouTube as well. Okay, let's go ahead and get this started. Chaos Corruption acts as a spiritual and physical rot that typically exploits a person's existing emotional or moral chinks in their armor. It often begins subtly through the influence of the warp, where intense emotions like pride, desperation, or hunger for knowledge attract. And by the way, I'm sorry for the view analytics and promote video stuff right there. It's because it's mine. So, but anyways, the attention of the dark gods. Proximity to chaos artifacts, warp-tainted areas, or even forbidden knowledge can slowly erode an individual's sanity and soul. As the corruption takes root, it twists the victim's perceptions, often leading them to believe their descent into heresy is a righteous path, until physical manifestations and mutations begin to sprout. If you guys know how to get those off of there, let me know, because I have no idea. Corruption is often a psychological slippery slope, filled by the specific nature of the four chaos gods. For instance, a soldier's righteous anger can be slowly amplified by corn until it becomes a mindless bloodlust. And on the same note, a dying person's plea for survival might be answered by Nurgle with the horrific gift of eternal, painless decay. The corruption becomes visible through mutations and total loss of individual agency. Victims may grow extra limbs, scales, or wings, and their armor and weapons can eventually fuse with their flesh to become biological extensions of their body. The Bible has its chaos corruption that is called the shadow of death. Psalms 44:19. Though thou hast sore broken us in the place of dragons, and covered us with the shadow of death. In the coming verses, we're going to see this deep as an actual entity. Genesis 1:2. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. Ezekiel 31:4. The waters made him great. The deep set him up on high with her rivers, running about his plains, and sent out her little rivers into all the trees of the field. Now we're going to see the false prophet being corrupted by this darkness. Zechariah 11:17. Woe to the idle shepherd that leaveth the flock. The sword shall be upon his arm, and upon his right eye. I tried to get it to where his eye was just darkened, but the AI was just not having it for some reason. So I just made do with this, so anyways. His arm shall be clean. And yes, I do use AI mostly for the biblical side of things, because let's just say some of the depiction that Christians do aren't necessarily biblically accurate, right? So I use AI for that mostly, but I have used AI for the Warhammer 40k stuff, but I do try to use the established pictures. Right up, and his right eye shall be utterly darkened. In the book of Adam and Eve, we see this darkness come over Satan. Chapter 13, verse 3-5. But when he transgressed my commandment, I deprived him of the bright nature, and he became dark. And when he was in the heavens, in the realms of light, he knew nothing of darkness, but he transgressed, and I made him fall from heaven unto the earth. And it was this darkness that came over him. Job 10:22 talks about a land of darkness and the shadow of death. Is this where the darkness comes from? Now we're going to be reacting to Hoodguard. Chaos corruption is a choice. And before I want to get into that, we're going to see where this darkness possibly could be coming from. So, and by the way, all this is in my video I did Monday, so if you want to check that out. So Job 10:21 and 22. Before I go whence, I shall not return, even to the land of darkness, in the shadow of death. And the land of darkness is darkness itself, and the shadow of death, without any order, and where light is as darkness. This does almost kind of sound like the warp in a way, right? So, very interesting. And again, we saw darkness was upon the face of the deep, right? And darkness, or in the false prophet's eye, was darkened, right? So, very interesting. All right, let's get this one going.
So, if a normal person sees a Chaos Space Marine or any Chaos entity, are they automatically corrupted? Thank you for this question, and the answer is not necessarily, but it does give us the opportunity to talk about how Chaos corruption works, so let's get into it. The corruption of Chaos is definitely one of the more convoluted themes in Warhammer 40k. The ways in which a person can be corrupted are myriad and definitely depend on who they are and what god is trying to seduce them. But I think one of the common misconceptions about chaos corruption is that it spreads like a disease, and that's not true. There's
Yeah.
an excellent
Yeah, like the zombie plague, right, comes from Nurgle, which you have to be by a warp rift and stuff like that, right? It's not spread by a disease of some kind or whatever, but, and again, a lot of it's because you chose to be there, right? But anyways, I digress.
Interview done by Death Guard Dave with Dan Abnett, one of the greatest writers for Warhammer 40k, and he talks about this, and I'll link that video below. But every single person who falls to chaos has at one point made the choice to do so. I'm not saying that chaos can't be coercive or that it can't influence a decision, but at the end of the day, a person decides whether they are going to serve the ruinous powers or not. A great example of this is the Death Guard in Mortarion. And this is spoilers for the book The Buried Dagger. Now, by this point in the Horus Heresy, Mortarion is obviously a traitor to the Emperor, but he hasn't really fallen to chaos yet. I'm not saying the Death Guard weren't slowly being corrupted during the Horus Heresy, but the choice to serve Nurgle had not been made yet. And on their journey to Terra in order to participate in the siege, Nurgle and Typhus struck. The plague that was unleashed on the Death Guard on their way to Terra was the coercion. We see in Mortarion's final moments before he makes that decision.
All right, real quick. Here's a couple more themes that we'll talk about. This darkness, right? That it has some power. So Colossians 1:13, who hath delivered us from the power of darkness, and had translated us into the kingdom of his dear Son. I wish I would have known that when I did Monday's video, because I definitely would have brought that one up. But yeah, there it is. And then we have here Acts 26:18, to open their eyes and turn from darkness to light, and from power of Satan unto God. And we know this darkness overtook Satan, right? So it's probably synonymous, right? The power of darkness and power of Satan. But anyways, so it can corrupt.
That it is indeed a decision. Mortarion absolutely could have just let his sons die and never made the commitment to serve a power that he has always despised. But seeing the suffering of his sons and seeing how far they had come since the start of the insurrection is what eventually made Mortarion side with Nurgle. But I'm getting a little off base here. You specifically asked about normal humans. And I would definitely understand why you think that it is somewhat contagious. Mortals fall to chaos very easily. But ironically, the reason for that is because of the society, the Imperium in which they live. These are not fortified.
If you do think about it, technically, right? If you see somebody with this power and you want that power, right? And then you gain it, and that next person over there, it's like, well, I want that power too, In a way, I guess it could be spread, but anyways.
Strong people who lead good lives who then suddenly turn to chaos.
The
vast majority of the Imperium is downtrodden and live very hard, short, and brutal lives.
That's for sure.
The big irony here is that the Imperium creates the conditions in which it's very easy for chaos to corrupt its citizens. When you're working,
especially for Nurgle, Papa Nurgle, man, it's a bounty. Plentiful
48-hour
bounty.
manufactorum
Yeah,
shifts, coming
bounty.
home to your one-room cell, essentially, and eating corpse starch, it's not going to be very difficult to choose
Yummy.
something that offers a better life. There's also a lack of mental fortitude that the citizens of the Imperium have, honestly due to the ecclesiarchy. In the new book Apostle by David Annandale,
They are very dumbed down, that's for sure. And unfortunately, we're starting to get there as a society as a whole. I was watching this thing where people asking what continent on they are, or that they're on, and they were saying the USA. It's like, oh my goodness, oh boy. Boy, have we fallen. But anyways.
Wordbearer character, Cerestes, uses the fact that a lot of citizens have never seen a Chaos Space Marine as a shock factor. Every time he reveals himself to a citizen of the Imperium, he notes that he can see their faith unraveling. They are looking at something that their religion and their masters have told them over thousands of years doesn't exist. And at the point that that lie becomes incredibly blatant is when you have mass uprisings and people leaving the ecclesiarchy to serve the ruinous powers.
Yeah.
But thank you for this question. It was a good one. And let me know if you all have any other questions in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.
Now we're going to be reacting to the 40k Cafe. How does corruption progress? But before we get into that, I want to get into the false prophet kind of being mutated by this darkness, it seems like. Zechariah 11:17. Woe to the idle shepherd that leaveth the flock. The sword shall be upon his arm and upon his right eye. His arm shall be clean dried up, and his right eye shall be utterly darkened. Right? That was in my short, but we can see that it's mutating him a little bit, right? So very interesting. Okay, let's get this going.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the 40k Cafe, and thank you, Grimsicle, for the request. I absolutely love this question. Mentally, physically, emotionally, and step by step, what happens when you're corrupted by the Chaos Gods? As we've seen on many occasions, servitude to the Chaos Gods isn't as bright and dandy as it may seem to be. You get power in exchange for just your soul and also a whole bunch of corruption. But what exactly happens when you are in the process of falling to chaos? I'm going to start off with Nurgle. When pledging yourself to the Grandfather, one may begin to gain resilience to any kind of corruption of disease and or pestilence. But this also comes at a cost. Your teeth may begin to yellow and or blacken. Your organs, eyes, or even your skin itself can begin to swell to an unnatural state. Boils and pus may coat over your body, and one may smell like that of rotten decay. But for the average individual, where they would probably find this excruciatingly painful to undergo this process, Nurgle makes it a blessing and pleasurable. Let's look at Lord Typhus or Typhon as an example. When Typhus was undergoing his servitude to the Grandfather, at one point he would receive a blessing.
This is interesting right here. So Revelation 16:2. And the first went out and poured out his vial upon the earth, and there fell a noisome and grievous sore upon the men which had the mark of the beast, and upon them which worshipped his image. So is this darkness mutating these people, taking the mark of the beast, right? Very interesting.
Which would appear in the form of a boil, if I remember correctly, along his stomach. For a brief moment, it was described as painful, but once it was set in place, he would go on to poke the boil, and could only describe the feeling as joyful. And the transmutation would only continue further until his body would swell up to an enormous portion and even inhabit other plagues, diseases, and even bugs. But what about Khorne and what happens when you dedicate your servitude to him? I like to use Karn as a perfect example. Khorne promises immense strength, glory, honor, and bloodshed. So with the promise of strength, your stature and muscles may grow 7 times to what it previously was.
Okay, that is interesting, actually. I'll bring up that what I brought up in Monday's video. Okay. So Genesis 10:8. And Cush begat Nimrod, and he began to be a mighty one on the earth. This same word for a mighty one is Gibberim. It is also used for those Genesis 6 giants as well. Can be used, not always, but Very interesting. And it says he began to be. So just like taking that mark of the beast, is this giving them some kind of power, and is it helping them grow, gain more muscle and stuff like that? I don't know. It's very interesting to think about.
In the book Slaves to Darkness, Perturabo goes to recover his brother Angron and comes face to face with Karn. The book goes into a very good detail of describing how his personality and once honorable self is no longer 100% there. He is depicted as a mad berserker, teetering on the edge of sanity, holding a chain axe slicked with blood, and that he is no longer taking care of his armor. Karn comes in and out of lucidity, warning the Iron Warriors that his once proud master is no longer himself. Not that Angron was ever fully sane to begin with. But I love
Yeah.
this moment because it depicts a perfect happy medium. Where Karn cares not from where the blood flows, you can see that Karn is trying his absolute best to hold on to the very little bit of sanity that he has left to warn his fellow comrades. But as we know, the individual that he becomes later on, the betrayer, he truly upholds exactly what it means to follow Karn, caring not from where the blood flows and adding skulls to the skull throne. Moving on to Slaanesh, I don't think there is another book that describes what happens when you start to be corrupted by Slaanesh better than Fulgrim. And I'm going to choose a moment where there is a certain painter whose name eludes me right now, but she is slowly being corrupted by the influential powers of Slaanesh, like everybody else on the ship of Fulgrim. As we know, Slaanesh is all about ecstasy, perfection, and excess. And the painter is trying to portray some kind of painting, but just can't seem to find the color palettes. She's
Okay. I want to get into this. So this is First Enoch, chapter 8. We're gonna see verse 1. So when Azazel taught men to make swords and knives and shields and breastplates, and made them known the metals of the earth, and the art of working them, bracelets, ornaments, and the use of antimony, beautifying the eyelids, and all kinds of costly stones, and all coloring tinctures. And there arose much godlessness, and they committed fornication, and they were led astray, and became corrupt in all their ways. Semyaza taught enchantments, root cuttings. Amaros, the resolving of enchantments. Berko, astrology. Kokabel, the constellations, and all that stuff. So, very interesting that this is going on in the biblical side of things as well, right? And we know Genesis 6, the angels came down and made it, so there's always this sexual connotation to it. But, anyways.
never satisfied with the options that are provided to her, and she goes through other means to find the perfect colors to depict whatever she wants. She starts to open wounds upon herself so that she may draw blood to use as a red color palette. The red
Leave.
was perfect, and so she becomes frenzied, ignoring
That's when you straight up leave her. Just bye. Later.
food and forgetting to self-sustain herself, she looks for other color palettes. She begins to use feces, other bodily fluids, and honestly anything possible in order to achieve whatever she was depicting. I think Fulgrim does an incredible job at describing the step-by-step process of corruption
Hey,
from
she's
Slaanesh.
organic.
And besides the concert of Maglaviglia, this moment stuck with me forever, as we truly get to see that nothing is too extreme to achieve whatever pleasure that one may desire. And lastly, we have Tzeentch, the Lord of Change. I have to be honest, I'm going to have a little bit of difficulty with this. With Tzeentch, corruption may come in the form of forbidden knowledge. An individual may find some sort of information that they believe is beyond valuable, and that starts as the perfect seed that Tzeentch needs in order to get into their mind. The person may go on a maddened frenzy, look for any additional information and or secret knowledge, and all while chipping away at the little bit of sanity that they may hold on to. For those that go on in prolonged indentured servitude, sometimes we may see that they will sprout feathers or other avian-like features, but this isn't always the case. Again, he is the Lord of Change. The most common thing that I see is that the individual may be talking in complete tongues and or insanity, while also
Hey, we see a lot of Christians do that. And look, let's just say Paul says when it's in public, you have to have an interpreter. That's all I'll say about that. But anyways,
carrying some sort of truth, just enough to plant the seed for the next victim to fall to the madness. And quite frankly, those that devote themselves to the Lord of Change must always be on their guard from their own master, as he has a well-known reputation of betraying those that are close to him. But Grimsicle, with that being said, I hope you all enjoyed this video. Thanks again, guys, for listening. Drop a comment if there's anything you want to hear about next. And as always, remember to follow for more.
We're going to wind it down here. Thank you for all those who liked the video. And if you disliked the video, thank you for at least giving me a chance. And if you're looking for a Jittlerless energy drink, check out Dubby. Right here. These guys. They have Crunchyroll licensed flavors as well. And they got plenty of flavors. And hit the link in the description. You get 10% off. And you'll be helping out the channel. But anyways, guys, you have a wonderful day.